Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. We don't know where democracy is alive or not in this world, but we know that Democracy Fund is alive and kicking in New Haven. That's our public financing program, the only municipal one in the state where you run for mayor, you can get matching public money if you agree to run clean and not take special interest money and limit your donations. We've had it since 2007. And we're about to enter a new era. Our guest today are going to tell us about that new era in democracy in New Haven. Alyson Heimer, the administrator of the Democracy Fund. Welcome back. Always a pleasure having you on. And James Bhandary-Alexander, who's here for different reasons over the years, a labor attorney, legal aid attorney, and now a board member of the Democracy Fund. Welcome. Thanks for coming in, folks.
Thanks for having us, Paul.
Thank you.
So, Allie, you both put together a proposed ordinance to the alder that we started this in 2007. We were the first city and still the only city in the state to have a public financing system for our local elections. And now, after I'm doing some math, that's dangerous, 15 and change years, we're in our 16th year, we're saying, hey, we looked at how it went, and we know some ways to make it better. So you have some proposals to the Board of Alders, hoping that they're going to change some of the rules of the Democracy Fund. Does either of you want to go and tell me what those changes are?
Well, let me first start by saying that the Democracy Fund was designed and developed so that we could, as a city, counter the perception that our mayoral elections were bought and paid for and somehow severely influenced by campaign contributions. The purpose was to try and limit the ongoing need for fundraising, to try and encourage candidates to have more conversations about subjects relating to citizens and to the neighborhoods, and fewer conversations about money while they were running for
And was
office.
it also about enabling more people to run? Like if you show you have a certain base of support, a bunch of people give you $5, then you should get enough money to run?
It does have the benefit of improving a grassroots candidate's chances by amplifying small dollar contributions. That wasn't, the sole purpose. It was really to make sure that there was clarity in who was giving money and how that money was being spent.
It's funny, you always
during the
emphasize
campaign.
that, but when I look at democracy funds, and this grew out of stories about corruption and how money was spent, and I look at the rules, you're specifically saying we don't want you to take certain money. We don't want people doing business with the city giving you money. We don't want political committees giving you money. We don't want you raising dollars above a certain amount. We'll give you the public dollars so you're beholden to fewer people. And we want people who might not be able to raise a lot of money to get some money so they can run too. Am I wrong about that?
I mean, arguably, they're beholden to more people because they have to go to more people to collect the same amount of money as they
Which
did
is the
before.
ideal because then
Right.
they don't. Yeah.
Right. So
But they're
it's,
getting public money too because they're limited from who they can raise from, but then you're giving them public dollars instead.
yeah. So traditionally in New Haven, people would collect money from businesses, law firms, contractors, companies, special interest groups, PACs, political action groups. And by limiting that and saying that we only really want you to collect contributions from individual people, and specifically we are going to reward you for collecting money from registered New Haven voters, it does change who candidates talk to the most.
All right. So tell me about some of the rules. James, you want to tell us about some of the rules you're proposing to make it run differently? Right now, by law, you can get $1,000 from someone, and you can take political committee money. If you're in the Democracy Fund and you're going to get public grants, you can only get $400 from somebody, correct? And you can't get it from any of those political committees, and then you get matching grants to give you enough money. Is that correct? And you have to be in a debate.
You have to be in a debate, yes. You have to participate in a debate.
And Victor Smith says, our present mayor is doing a great job. One good term deserves another. Thank you, Victor, for listening.
I mean, Paul, first, let me say thank you for having us on, and it's really great to talk about this. I joined the Democracy Fund board not because anybody asked me to, but because of, I saw on the website that they needed people. And it's not my area of law. I'm not an expert in this area.
I'm going to ask you to go close to the
Yeah,
mic.
yeah, yeah. I'm not an expert in this area, but it is exciting to be part of something that the city is doing in an affirmative way to make our democracy better. And it really is running counter to the national trend. A lot of what is in the Democracy Fund ordinance, which is a voluntary program, candidates don't have to participate, is really designed to put forth a system along the lines of what pro-democracy Congress people and advocates at the federal level had been pushing for many, many years. So, for example, the idea that corporations shouldn't be giving candidates money goes back to Teddy Roosevelt. The McCain-Feingold Act was a bipartisan act of Congress. And all of that was rolled back by consistent Supreme Court advocacy that was itself, ironically, funded by dark money.
Right, corporations are people.
Right.
Money is free speech.
Right. So I feel like as someone who's sort of aware of that trend at the national level and locally here, it's great to be part of a program that is trying to like keep in place a lot of those protections for voters, which is really what I consider this a protection for voters, to know that they have a system where there are standards, where there's transparency and so forth. The one change, to answer your question, that I was pretty excited about, or most excited about, all of the changes reflect what we've heard as board members and what Allie has told us based on her experience are consistent problems. The one change I really like is the self-financing limitation.
Yeah, that was interesting, yeah.
It's going from, I believe, 15,000 to 1,500 is what we decided on. Self-financing is a major issue in the state and in the country. That there was just a Supreme Court case about the extent to which Ted Cruz's self-financing could be paid back by campaign contributions. A case that Ted Cruz won 6-3, with a vicious dissent, viciously good dissent from Justice Kagan, saying this is a sign of the times. That we can have.
So right now, if you're running for mayor in New Haven, you can give yourself $23,000, which isn't huge. What do campaigns usually spend? Like $70,000, $100,000?
It depends. It really does range. Successful campaigns traditionally spend between $300,000 and $500,000.
Whoa, that many you need? You can't run for mayor unless?
No, you can run for mayor, but if you would like to win, unfortunately, it costs a lot of money.
And so how much can you get from the Democracy Fund?
You can get up to $125,000 in matching funds plus the grant, and that resets each cycle. So you can get 2 grants right now of $23,000. So that's 46 plus 2 rounds. If you were to max out your matching funds, it would be $250,000. So
that's
almost 300
from the government.
From the government.
And that'd be on
Nobody
top
ever
of it.
has.
But what I mean is that would then be on top of you are allowed to raise a certain amount.
You are allowed to.
So if you got that 300, how much would you have raised?
You would have to raise at least $70,000 or so in order to qualify for that money.
Mm-hmm. And is there diminishing returns? I mean, Linda McMahon ran for Senate with $50 million twice, did not win. These Republican candidates for governor have 4 straight cycles, have put millions of their own dollars in, have not won. After a certain point, is it more money than you need? I mean, you got your message. How much do you need to get your message out so everyone knows you're running? And
well, if you look at the number of voters, right, and how much it costs to send a piece of mail, which is usually $1 per person, if you're targeting your voters quite well, you can win a mayoral race in New Haven with, 12,000 to 20,000 votes, which, is not an insignificant cost. Yeah. However, it doesn't just take one mailer. You need people, and
by mailer, do you mean through the mail?
Through the mail, yeah.
Because a lot of people drop at the door. A lot of people use the web. They have flyers.
People use door knockers. They use social media. They use all different kinds of methods to get in touch with voters. Mm-hmm. But we call each of those things touches, right? Mm-hmm. How many touches does it take to convince a voter one way or the other to change their mind, or to believe what you're saying, or to even hear what you're saying? Sometimes they'll get a mailer, or they'll see a social media post and they will just scroll right past it.
So we're talking to Democracy Fund's administrator and board member Ali Heimer, James Bhandary-Alexander, about changes they proposed to make the state's only municipal financing system even better. And so, James, you're excited that a change that, if approved by the Board of Alders, would say right now you can give $23,000 to your own campaign, which isn't enough to buy an election, it sounds like. It'd be like one mailer to everybody. Or that who's you hope will vote for you. Or you're going to cut it. You can only spend $1,500 on your own campaign.
Right. Exactly.
And why did you make that change?
Well, I think we made that change because, I can speak for myself as a board member. When I voted on it, to me, it just, I want more working class people able to run for office. I don't like the idea of wealthy people being able to buy an election with their own money much more than I like the idea of campaign contributions from PACs and corporations determining the outcome. So for me, that was the motivation.
You look at national programs like Emily's List, their slogan is early money is like yeast. It helps
Right.
raise the dough. So when you have somebody coming into an election who already has $20,000 or more in the books, they can use that money not for direct mail or for social media, but to hire people to help them raise more money, to help have a poll in the field to tell them exactly what their messaging should be to the people of New Haven. They can, however they spend that money is up to them, but that early money does make an impact and does change people's ability to be competitive.
And do you have other changes suggested? Maximum individual donation. You want to let people give $450 rather than $400 and let that count toward your match. What was the thinking on that?
Other way around, actually. So right now, with the CPI increase in 2022, we increased the maximum allowable contribution to $445. What this would do is actually limit that down and bring it back to a new baseline. The baseline used to be $300. It's been adjusted for inflation for the past 16 years. And, as it edges closer and closer to $1,000, which is actually the state limit, it sort of decreases the intent, which is to really prioritize those small dollar contributions. In addition, we also decreased the minimum contribution from $10 to $5, both to be in more, in line with the states.
And that we've already done, or is that going to be?
We did that this year, but we're going to codify it by the adding these ordinance changes.
And so I added backwards. You want to go from 445 to 400.
Correct.
And then you're also changing how much people get, right? The matchable contribution limit of 30. So right now, 25. If you give up the $25 of any donation you give can be matched by this fund if you qualify. You have to get a certain number of contributions to qualify from New Haven voters, right?
Yes.
And then once you got those, the first $25, if I have it right, gets matched of every contribution from a New Havener.
That was the baseline in 2007. That has also been adjusted for CPI. It's at 35 now. It would create a new baseline at the 35.
Okay, so you put that in the ordinance.
Yep.
Why do you need to do that if you're able to have it with the baseline?
Well, because you read the ordinance and you thought you were only going to get the first $25 max. So it's important to make sure that
So
we're
you're just
keeping
updating
this
some
up
of
to
what's
date.
going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And they also want to make explicit. I keep getting confused by this. And Allie will know every time I read any story about the Democracy Fund, I call her to walk me through every rule again, even though I covered it it was a twinkle in the eye. I had breakfast with John DeStefano. They said, we're going to do this. And I still get so confused 16 years later on what the rules are. This is darn confusing. So the exploratory committee, someone's running for mayor, and some people do these fake exploratory committees first, right? And I know that's cynical, but I guess sometimes they say, okay, I'm not going to run. The people didn't love me and want me. But why do they do a separate exploratory committee? And how does that work with the money they raise and what limits they abide by when they then decide to make a formal run for mayor?
Let me start by saying that an exploratory committee is a legally allowable way to raise money, and it's in state law, and that there's not much that we, the fund, can do for folks that are in an exploratory phase because they are expressly not candidates yet. And the fund can really only tell you, what the expectations are for your candidacy once you become a candidate. People do choose for a lot of different reasons to have exploratory committees. Sometimes it is to test the waters. Sometimes it's for other reasons.
What is the benefit? Like, what don't you have to do when you're an exploratory that you would do if you're an official candidate?
You can't declare. You can expend money for doing things like opposition research. You can try and create a fundraising ground game. You can try and...
Can't you do that when you're a candidate too?
You can, but, if you are trying to do something very, very seriously, sometimes it helps to have a little bit of a springboard timeline before you actually decide that you're all in.
Okay. But what's the consequences of saying you're all in? What changes that next day?
So there's a lower limit on what you can collect from donors during an exploratory phase. That resets after you declare.
So there's a state lower limit.
Yes. So
how
it's
much can you get?
$375.
Oh, and then you get 1,000.
And then you can get 1,000.
Gotcha. Now, how does that affect? So if I raise all this money beforehand, does that count toward the Democracy Fund? Can I go back and raise more from the same people and have spent that other money? Can I transfer the money?
You're allowed to spend the money. You're not allowed to roll over the money. When you start with the Democracy Fund, your accounts start as zero. So you should have either spent all of that money or returned all of that money. And that's why we try to make it a little bit more explicit that, when you have an exploratory committee first, you have to zero out your accounts before you accept any public dollars, and none of those contributions count towards your 200. Now, you can return all of those funds, you can prorate those funds back to donors, based on what you've spent, but you really do need to start from the beginning now that you are a declared
So if I were
candidate.
that candidate, I'd want to quickly pay all my rent up front for the whole campaign. I'd want to quickly buy all my lawn signs, that kind of stuff.
You're legally not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to spend money on things like rent outside of the period for which you are exploring.
What about signs?
What would the sign say? Hi, I'm thinking about running.
Oh, you can't. Okay. Gotcha. And now you also want to let the city clerk. Now, city clerk is the other citywide position, not counting a register of voters, which is a state office, right?
Yes.
So why do we want to have a city clerk? Do people generally spend money on city clerk campaigns?
They do, but they find it extremely difficult. It's hard to raise money for a city clerk race. Usually people raise between $20,000 and $80,000 for a citywide race where you'd have to talk to just as many voters as you would if you were running for mayor.
But does anyone even care, or you just get voted along with the line, right?
It really depends. There are certainly independent people who have run for city clerk before.
That's true. When I'm on your board. So why do you want to have the city clerk included in this?
Because if we believe as a city, that this is the right thing to do and this is how we stop, the influence of money in politics, then it should be accessible to other offices.
So the same issues apply for that. I guess the one thing I've never figured out is why we haven't elected city clerk. Because democracy, we elect everything. Do we put up to a vote what creamer you buy for the coffee at City Hall?
Some towns have an elected dog catcher, and we don't have one of those.
And others have city managers. Yeah. Well, yeah. It's archaic, isn't it, or no? City clerk.
Why in particular is that position? Is it archaic?
Because you're not usually doing policy. Mm-hmm. Like, if I were to advise city clerk candidates, say, make it a real political case. Say you're going to make this as a way to, expose the slumlords, empower people with information about who really owns property through LLCs on your block, but it's really focused on dog licenses and paper filing.
Sounds like you might want to run for city clerk.
No, I don't want to run for anything ever, but I'm just saying, if you want to be Ralph Nader, I could see why you'd be a Nader, I'd be a great job. But right now it's a part-time job where you really just show up and make sure they're filing all the campaign stuff.
Well, you're kind of making the case for including it because this could open the door to more people who want to take some kind of aggressive approach to the office. Same question
But you also want them to be politically neutral because they're dealing with absentee ballots and certifying elections.
Well, I don't think you can be partisan. You can be
in
neutral
the
partisan sense without being neutral vis-a-vis problems in the community.
That's a good point.
Yeah, a lot of what they do really doesn't come down to party. And when you're talking about absentee ballots, we have 2 registrars of voters who are just serving their parties.
At least 2, right?
Depends on the town. Yeah. So
that's another discussion about the oligopolical law that says even if a Republican gets no votes, there is a Republican registrar.
Right.
But I think there's a question here, a future question possibly about, the school board and something we've discussed as a board, as a Democracy Fund board. I can see myself definitely moving in that direction of, if there's more voting for school board, if there are more school board members who are elected, or even if it just remains 2, that could be another future direction, even though it's not a citywide office. Currently it's half a city.
Now, so would you two like to see what it was the decision not to put Board of Alders and City and Board of Ed as seeking to have that under the Democracy Fund?
Well, I think for the Board of Alders, correct me if I'm wrong, Allie, but I think this falls under our idea for a kind of pilot program called the Democracy Fund Pledge, which would not be financing Board of Alder races, but would allow Board of Alder candidates to take a pledge to follow all the essential elements of the Democracy Fund.
Without any benefit.
Without any benefit except for just the seal of, of the Democracy Fund saying this is
how much do people spend for Alder?
That also depends. I think some of the most expensive races that are very competitive have been around $10,000 to $15,000, but on the whole, people spend between $800 and $3,000.
And a lot don't even file reports, right?
If you spend under $1,000, you legally do not have to.
All right, so one question I had for you guys is, how do we judge whether this has promoted democracy? Has the Democracy Fund made New Haven more democratic over the 16 years? And how do you judge that?
So we actually went to a conference in Albuquerque this past summer where we met with administrators from public financing programs from across the country, and everybody seemed to be sort of struggling with that question. How do you judge efficacy? How do you judge success? What measures should you be looking at to show that the program is working? And different cities and different, levels of government had different answers for that. One of the things that we're looking to do this summer is get an intern to help with some research projects that would sort of look at the historical changes to the number of New Haven voters who have decided to participate, who have decided
Right, so it'll
to
be chicken and
contribute
egg. Yeah.
over the years, and see what impact it's actually had. And then also to take a look at other cities and compare New Haven to those cities to see, if it was our program or if this is just a statewide trend. Or anything like that. The number of candidates is certainly something that's interesting. Whether or not more people have decided that they could run or should run because they can have access to a program like this is definitely interesting.
I mean, I would say New Haven's a cleaner city ethically than it was. I don't know if it's because Democracy Fund or not, if that was part of a different demand. I'm not saying everything is a clean decision, but I think it's dramatically more ethical than it was. What was allowed, I'm not even talking about the individuals. The same individuals who were in office before now, what they feel is okay to do and what not to do. I don't know if Democracy Fund's the reason or not, but definitely. And we get debates we might not have other had, because you have to debate if you're in, right?
I think there are a lot of things that play a role. I mean, when we had, when we first started the Democracy Fund 15 years ago, we were in a different age of social media. Now things are much more scrutinized, and it's, everything is videotaped. So,
Yeah.
I think that definitely plays a role in how people govern, how people are seen doing their job. We put cameras on our police officers, right? Like there's
And now you have
complete
3 out of
change in
4
in
candidates
activity.
declared for the Democratic nomination have decided to participate this year.
We have,
How
we-
many
we have-
people have declared?
there are
Well, including
4
the exploratory.
declared.
Yeah, including the
Oh,
exploratory.
including exploratory. So
for the primary. Yeah.
So we can't include exploratory for a couple of
He
reasons.
has said he would, though. He said if he runs.
If he
Yes.
runs, and that would be great when, and if he decides.
And
to
Speak
do
Up,
that.
Do Support submitted paperwork. Justin Ellicker submitted paperwork.
Yes,
And Tom Goldenberg said he's not going to.
correct.
If John Carlson, the Republican, has embraced it, he used it last time, and if he runs
Correct.
again, he's going to run it again. So is that success?
I mean, that would be one way to measure success, yes.
And then, but the other question
It is success. I absolutely think so. I mean, part of the reason this is a really important question is because of the Democracy Fund. Like I said, in my opinion, is carrying the values and principles of clean elections and being in a larger environment that is going in the exact opposite direction. So being able to show and answer this question of like, has it been effective or not, is part of how we carry that message into the future and like remind the larger system that there's another way to do this.
I guess I would argue that elections are cleaner too. I mean, New Haven, there used to be someone who went around to fix certain machines at a certain time of day based on what they thought the voter turnout was in key places. I had one guy told me he used to go driven in a van and given the name of dead voters at each place to go in. I mean,
Yeah, but those are extreme examples. The overall system like functions on a
money.
huge amount of money. I mean,
Right.
and you just look at the recent news that what's his name, Leonard Leo, who is like national operative, political operative, has been given $1.5 billion of money to use for dark money to influence politics in the United States. That's not corruption operating in a sort of old big city machine type of way. That's the fundamental corruption happening in our politics all over the country.
And, my wife and I were talking about this because, sometimes incumbents who supported public financing choose not to use it when their job is threatened by a challenge because it's easy for them to still collect those $1,000 contributions from people who do business with the city. John DeStefano, after creating the fund, decided that in 2011 not to participate. Tony Harp last time.
Tony Harp never used the Democracy
right.
Fund. She did use CEP at the state level when she ran for state.
But here, when she fell, so
Well,
our question,
which I think, those are politicians making political decisions. I don't think, or at least my personal view, again, getting back to your awesome question. Like, how has it functioned overall? That's the question, because any individual politician is expected to do what's in their self-interest.
Right.
for a
That's what we got
campaign.
down to. So how do we
Yeah.
change that? So one thing I said to my wife was, well, shouldn't we just make it a culture where you are rewarded by voters for showing that you're abiding by cleaner money principles? So you go in it because you get enough of an advantage from voters. Because I've heard politicians have said this to me. Do I get enough advantage? Because I get enough more votes because people think I've done the right thing with this. Or most people don't even care about it, right, in certain communities. Or will I get more of advantage from taking more of that money and being able to spend it? So you're right. How they make that decision about what's in their interest tells you. And you're limited by the Supreme Court rulings that say you can't require people to be in.
100%.
So how do we promote this as a public? Do we put pressure on people? We want you to participate, or do we just make the Democracy Fund work well enough that they'll see that it's in their interest?
Well, part of the changes that we made were to make it a little bit clearer, to make it, more streamlined, to make it so that there weren't as high hurdles to have to jump over in order to access the funding, in order to, make requests for matching funds, and make sure that, we could have liquidity in the fund at any given time to make sure that we could pay out to candidates what they had earned by following the rules. It's really an individual decision. Why people choose to run for office is their own personal choice. And they're going to have to figure out how they want to do that and how they want to raise the money to do that on their own.
Heimer, James Bhandary-Alexander, thank you for being on Democracy Fund. Thanks for coming in the first segment today about democracy in New Haven. Last words about why we should care about democracy and the Democracy Fund in our city level.
We want to have a democracy in the future. So I invite all people interested in democracy, please reach out to us. We will come and speak wherever you are about democracy.
Allie, why do we care about democracy in New Haven?
Because it's a program that works, and because democracy gives everybody a voice, and everyone who's here deserves a voice.
All right, so we did democracy in New Haven. We're going to take a break now. That's the Afro-Semitic experience before we go wish you knew how it feel to be free. And then we're going to talk about democracy in Israel and whether that is with our resident expert who's a correspondent for Israel's largest circulation newspaper who actually lives in New Haven. She's going to tell us about they're marching in the streets about democracy right now. So thank you to Allie and James. And how do people find out about the Democracy Fund? Just Google it.
They can Google it and go to the city website.
And thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Because
Thank
we're
you for
big
having
believers
us.
in this program.
Thanks, Paul.
And actually, we're going to take on the break is the Ballad of Ned Clampett and the impact of democracy and self-funding candidates on policy.
Come listen to my story about a man named Ned.